How much money could you be losing because you're not appreciating your own employees? Is employee burnout plaguing your own business? And why do major companies focus on culture? We're going to be discussing this and so much more on Culture Tactics on this episode on All Things Locs. Antonio Garcia, welcome to All Things Locs, the podcast that explores everything related to leadership, operation, culture, and strategy. Today, we're going to be talking about culture. I'm here with our co-host, Dr. Dan Hassani. Dan, good to have you.
Good to have me.
Yes,
I'm here.
We're here. We're ready to roll.
Culture. Let's do it.
Culture is important.
Yes, it is.
Culture seems to be one of those things that is overlooked a lot in businesses, wouldn't you say?
It is. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people think it's some new thing that's just sprouted up over the last few years. You know, since COVID, it's all of a sudden culture is important, whereas it's been very prevalent in business for well over 50 years. But it still has a very bad look to it in the sense of how people perceive it. But it is the backbone of your company.
It always seems like it's just business. It's operations, it's results, and then the byproduct of that is your culture. When it seems like it's actually quite opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, it's work on the business and then work on your employees second versus, hey, if we do it the other way around and develop employees who really want to work for the company, you have an amazing company. But that's 100% is you work on what you can see right in front of you, which is the business. And what I find is that the business, you get results real quick. So you can put things into place, see an outcome, see a result. Culture takes time. And that's where it takes time to develop. And that's where I feel a lot of people, they don't give it enough room to run, so to speak. Yeah. And then the other aspect too is how do you measure it? That's where a lot of people, how do I measure my culture? How do I know? Whereas you can measure your revenue, you can measure productivity depending upon the industry you're in. Some of those things are very easy, but then it's all right. What's your culture 0 to 100? I have no clue. How do I even measure that?
So for us, when we're creating Locs and for us creating the Locs protocol, when it comes to culture itself, like we were very intentional of having that being one of the key anchors for any business, whatever it is that we choose to work with. Why is culture such a powerful anchor that all practices, all businesses need to appreciate?
So before I answer that directly, I really feel like it's important to understand what culture is, right? Because I know in corporate, the misconception is that culture is having pizza every Friday, having
get carved up, right
kombucha on tap, and like a ping pong table, and that's the shit that a lot of companies get wrong. It's you can't treat employees like crap for 28 days out of the month, and then hey, we're gonna go to Vegas for a weekend trip, and everything is all good, right? They still
usually that's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's
all right, all is forgiven.
I'm gonna splurge on you guys, and it's like a parent buying their kid like a PS3 or something like that. It's like, hey, I know I just screamed at you, and you were wrong, you were right, and I was wrong, but here's a PS3 to make it up. It's like they remember that shit. So that's where I feel like a lot of companies don't even understand what culture actually is. And it's really the understanding of what are your beliefs, what are your values, what are your standards. That's really what culture comes down to. So having a Pizza Fridays is nice. I like ping pong as much as the next person or foosball, whatever it is. But it's really understanding what do we do day to day that is creating or enhancing motivated employees. And how do you create an environment where employees actually want to come in and work for you and want to help you grow your business or help you grow your practice. In terms of, what, just do me a favor, repeat your question again for me. I kind of got myself lost there.
No worries. So when we look at the Locs protocol, right? So it's a strategy that we use with best practice strategies with our own business, and we were very intentional of choosing 4 key anchors for every business, and culture was a powerful one. Tell us a little bit on why culture is so important and why this is one of the key pillars for us.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback on what I was just saying, it's really about creating a workforce that wants to work with you. And nothing is worse than being very dedicated as a manager, supervisor, or owner, and then you see everybody else and they don't really give a shit. It's like it's a paycheck. I think that's the mentality, right? It's just a paycheck to me. Clock watching from 9 to 5, no matter what, as soon as 5 o'clock hits, I'm out the door. Culture is extremely important because it sets the whole standard, so to speak, not just for your employees, but whatever you're selling, whatever product or whatever service. culture is going to determine how that is delivered. And if you're in healthcare, it's not just a matter of let's get more patients and spend double on marketing. It's how do you get people to keep coming back? How do you get returning patients if they need the treatment again? Or how do you get referrals? And all of that is tied to the culture. And when you have employees who are engaged, meaning they're motivated and they don't have one foot out the door, they're going to work harder, meaning they're going to service people at a higher level. They're going to care about customers and patients more so than a person who's not engaged and motivated. And they're going to also create more output, meaning they're going to just work a lot harder and you're going to get more out of them, which I do just want to also add, it's not a matter of squeezing as much juice as you can out of employees. It's not a matter of get as much as you can with little help. It's just people work harder when they care. And that's why it's so important. You know, it's just really understanding what kind of environment do you want employees to thrive in.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
So from that standpoint, I would actually ask you, when you're going into companies and you're assessing them, knowing what culture is versus is not, how do you actually assess that, so to speak? And then how do you help business owners understand more so, not just how to build it out, but you had asked me, I think it was like 2 episodes ago when we were discussing leadership, about how to keep things sustainable and long-term to make sure that once a business hits its target, they don't just regress back to where they used to be. How do you kind of help them identify it and then maintain it long-term?
So there's a couple things that you can do. So we're in Vegas, right? And a big thing for Vegas is our football team, right? So with Raiders, there's a motto that they have. There's this, or slogan, whatever. And do you know what it is?
Just win, baby. Right?
Just win, baby. Just win. Doesn't matter. Just win.
Yep.
Just fucking win, dude. Just win. And they have these pillars within their company. And I think when it comes to business owners, when you're trying to figure out or identify what's my culture, is like, well, what's the tone that you're setting? What's the tone that you're setting as a leader? And how is that trickle effect seeping into the heart and soul and being internalized by every single employee? And you see this in sports teams, and you see this in like military groups, for example, like the Navy SEALs or the Green Berets or Army Rangers, is that it all kind of boils down to what a value is and how you identify that value. So what I like is identifying what that is with an organization. And it's amazing how many people that we worked with that actually don't have their core values in place. So whether you're talking about a religion, so whether there's someone is practicing Judaism, or someone is Catholic, or someone is Christian, or whatever it is that there's core values in those religions. There's core values in those sports teams. And it's the meaning of those things that you carry out on a day-to-day basis that then creates the culture. So if we're not doing that in a business, then it's kind of all over the place. But when you're very intentional and you're talking about that, that's huge. Do you mind if I give you an example of just what I use for myself?
I love it.
Cool. So with all of my businesses and also with my own family, I have one that's called the AP way. So it's APWAI. So AP way. It's just kind of what we use to remember it for ourselves. And I'll just speak to you as if you're one of my sons. So in this family, being a Garcia or working with this company, AP way stands for authenticity, positivity, work ethic, accountability, and integrity. So authenticity, what this means is that you are perfect the way you are. You don't need to be fake. You don't need to make anything up. That you don't need to be something that you're not. You could be authentic and full. Positivity means that we're staying away from anything that's negative. It means that you're looking at life with the glass half full. That there's always a way to win. That no matter if you're doing something that sucks or you're having the time of your life, always maintain a positive attitude. Then work ethic is no matter what we're doing, give it our all. Give it 110%. Doesn't really matter. A is for accountability, that you are answerable for your actions. That you need to own everything that you do and not deflect anything. And I stands for integrity, that you are doing everything with that's ethical, high moral caliber, and that you're not doing anything that if people were watching, you wouldn't do. And so my wife's like that. We're instilling that in our kids. We still instill it with our company. So what would be the opposite of that? If someone was fake, they're not authentic. If someone has a bad attitude, negative Nancy, they're not gonna work with us. If someone is lazy and they don't do what they're supposed to do, they don't have a good work ethic, they're not going to be hanging out with my kids. They're not going to be hanging out with my wife. They're not going to be hanging out with me. Also accountability. If people are constantly deflecting what they should have done and making excuses, they're not going to work with us. And if someone is doing some shady stuff, they're lacking integrity, they're not going to be around us. And imagine if you had an entire workforce that embodied that down to a T. That's your culture. So you reverse engineer that of what you're looking to do, but it's also a trickle effect of what the core values are of the leader. And there's a process of identifying what that is so that you can instill that every single day with your team when you're telling them like, hey Dan, I saw what you did. You pulled in extra hours to get this account over the line or finish up with these insurance denials and you got that completed. Way to stay accountable, and you worked really, really hard, and you're exemplifying these core values of the company, and that's why I hired you, and you're the man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so you said, I can really appreciate that a lot, because you said two things there that I feel like a lot of people miss. Number one is the values that the person at the top has.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love is, we want to create this atmosphere, and we want employees to act a certain way. And we have expectations of how employees should act as soon as they walk through the door. And then the owner does the fucking opposite. It's like, I want a culture of accountability and great communication. And then you have somebody who micromanages the shit out of people, doesn't hold themselves responsible for anything, and wants people basically to be yes people. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to kind of balance that out. No matter how hard maybe the employees work to create and foster that environment, what gets said from the top always has the impact. So that's number one, is whether you're the father, you're the leader of the clan, the buck stops with you. So you have to understand that you need personal values that are going to reflect what you're within your company as well.
Yeah. You know what? One of my mentors, he talks about that. Like, I wish there was this machine that if someone were to walk into a hospital or someone walked into whatever business, and it's like right when you walk in the door, there's this machine there that you put your hand on it and it sucks away all of the drama, all of the pettiness, all of the attitude, the sleep deprivation, whatever it is. And that it just sucks it out. You walk in and then you do your job. You do your job to the best of to your ability for those 8 hours or however long your shift is. And then as you're leaving on the way out and you're clocking out, you put your hand back on that machine and it puts it right back in. So we don't have a machine like that. It doesn't work like that. Humans aren't like that. But the closest thing to that is to have a very distinct, palpable environment where your culture and your core values are at the forefront. So when someone works at the police department and they put on that uniform and they walk in, it's a switch. Yep. They turn it right on. When someone at the Las Vegas Aces, right, our WNBA team, when they put on that jersey, it's on. Or that jersey, it's on. When someone's a Navy SEAL or someone is a pilot in the Air Force and they're hopping into the F-22 and they slap everything on, it's a switch, and you're embodying those things. So when you have that distinct and clear in your organization, that's the closest thing that you're going to have. And that's an attitude thing. That's a mindset thing. It's also a heart set thing. And I think when you have that across the board with your team, as what you're saying, like performance is better. Patient outcomes are better. There's less errors. There's a higher productivity. The list goes on of the positives of when you have actually really great culture versus one that's rather toxic. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's all very fair points. And I find that even just your story about your, like the family values is, but when you really look at your own values in the position of, leadership and how that determines how you act, and I go back to I know mine, when I first analyzed my own personal values, I think it was like back in 2018 or so, it was, I think, respect and trust were the top two. So if you think about my top values, respect, how's that gonna, change my own behaviors, or how do I act towards people if I'm always kind of assessing them through the lens of, are they respecting me or not? It's not gonna really be that good. And that's why it's important to understand what the values are, but then be able to know how that impacts everybody else. Because you talked about like personal development, that's a huge part of it, is how do what's important to me, how does it impact everybody else? But then you said something else too about hiring people and hiring the right people for your culture.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd like to see if you can maybe expand on that, because I find that's something that it seems very basic, but I get the sense that a lot of people struggle with that, maybe more so about their overall hiring strategy. So if you can maybe touch on that for a little bit, because I feel like that's really good.
Yeah. So what's also important to know is that there's a lot of really, really great tools out there to help you identify the right person for you. What I always recommend to start off is maybe have someone do a behavioral assessment of some type. Predictive index is really good. Some people, they use DISC. Some other people, they'll use like the Larry Wilson Institute. Others will use Enneagram, that one. I've always had a hard time pronouncing that one. Yeah, it's one of those, right? And what I really lean towards predictive index, because what that does is identifies the drives of the individual. So you can have people that through their observable behavior, if they're like a driver or if or dominance, or if someone is analytical or conscientious, it's like these are things that you can eyeball. I can look at you and be like, you're acting like Mark Zuckerberg, and you're a beep bop bop bop. You're like a robot. It's like I can tell that they're analytical, but their drives could actually be very different. So I think that there's really, really great tools. The data is in, and I think a lot of business owners can use that to their advantage, that people have a tendency to want to hire people like themselves.
Yes.
And that may not be the best thing as you're scaling your organization, where you need to hire people that are the opposite of you, but because you're not jiving with them on that level, if you're a doctor and very precise, and then you're like, I need to have a killer sales team and sales manager, and they're these kind of wild mavericks, it's like, they're not good for my team. It's like actually the perfect person for your team. So oftentimes I recommend people looking at data. I have a behavioral assessment tool, and then also identifying whether they're in alignment with your core values. So you mentioned respect and trust, right?
Yep.
So cool. So I'm asking questions of when were there situations in your previous job or other occupations where you demonstrated that they can trust you? What are some things that you can do that someone would break your trust if you were in a leadership position? And like, if I was Dan, and respect and trust and a few others were mine, asking questions to make sure that they're a good cultural fit. And because the drives are there, like they're wired for the job, and then are they a good fit for my culture? And then if those two things check off, then I move over into the suitcase test. Like, okay, that checks out here, that checks out here. Tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about where you went to school. What would you do in this position? What would you do like if this particular job scenario? Now you're actually doing the suitcase test. And with those things check out, then I would move into hiring. But you want to start with their behavioral assessment, then core values, culture, and then that one.
Yeah.
If you miss that, if you're like, I really like the person, but he's toxic, but he has a good background, it's going to be a lot of heartbreak. It's going to be a lot of sadness, a lot of tears later. And it's probably, I would argue, that's one of the most expensive things for an organization, is actually hiring the wrong person. It will drain your money. It will suck the life out of you. And it actually jades a lot of entrepreneurs. But it's because they're not following a system to identify their culture, let alone the people that belong in that culture.
Man, that was good. But I want to I kind of want to touch on the last point. You talked about let's call it what it is. We'll hire the wrong person. Like, even if you have the best system in place, nobody's 100% for every hire. You're going to hire some people that's just like, all right, this didn't work out, they're dud, or just it's not a good fit. So think about the mistake. You just talked about the time, money, energy that you spend recruiting, onboarding, X, Y, and Z. But then how much do you lose by keeping that person with your company? Like, you've already identified they're not a good fit. And then, well, do I kind of placate my own ego about trying to make this person work? Mm-hmm. You know, like I'm going to make it work. I'm going to train them more. And it's just how much resources do you pour into it versus just admitting, all right, it wasn't a good fit. It happens. It's not about me. It's just, it's, at the end of the day, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But the other part of it too, though, that I like that you mentioned is not hiring the same person.
Yeah.
So I've seen it. I've been part of that, like myself. It's like, hey, I found a person who's just like you. And I'm very, from my personality going into a practice, I'm locked in.
Yeah.
And I'm focused on the outcome of the patient. But I know when I was younger, it was hard for me to break away from that and then maybe have a little bit more fun or be a little bit more engaging is probably the best way to put it. And I got to the point where I got to hire some people and not me. I got to hire the person who's going to crack the jokes and bring a little bit more levity and humor.
Yeah.
And a person who's doing the hiring is like, I found somebody just like you. I'm like, stop that. Like, stop hiring me.
Yeah.
Start hiring the person who's not me.
They can't compete with me. There's only one Dan.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't need the same personality. We gotta let so there is definitely, like you said, and I'm glad you brought that up, is the aspect of hiring different personalities and understanding that they bring something different to the table. They have strengths and weaknesses.
Just you saying that reminds me of a client where that's exactly kind of what they did was when you look at things from like a quadrant perspective, like there's 4 corners, right? And they did exactly that. The CEO hired a lot of people that was like themselves. And this CEO was like happy-go-lucky, super fired up, always positive side of life. Like business is kind of 2 things. It's offensive and defensive. Like what are the things that we're mitigating that reduce risk, that don't hemorrhage money, right? So there's the defensive side of business and the offensive side of business. And for them, the CEO was very, very offensive. JVs, partnerships, get money, close the deal, and figure out all this other stuff later. And he started hiring people that were just like him because not everybody can stomach that type of guy. Yep. It's just like, dude, calm down.
Bring it down a notch.
Yeah, bring it down a notch. Like, how can I speak to you? You're going like 1,000 miles an hour. Like, chill out, bro. Yep. Like, please, for the love of God. And that's all they hired. So what ended up happening was like they had really great sales guys, really great BDOs, really great developing partnerships, JV, so on and so forth. But the rest of that quadrant, they were over here on the offensive side. They didn't have anybody that really cared about team experience or employee satisfaction because they were just running and gunning. I don't got time for that. And then they also didn't have anybody that reverse engineered processes and procedures so they can maintain quality assurance. They were running and gunning. And then they also didn't have another quadrant of people that didn't really hold anyone accountable, where they're very that group of people is on your ass to make sure that you do what you say you're going to do. And so they were leaning really heavy on this side, and that expresses itself in a different way in their business where, like, operationally speaking, they were lacking a lot. They were missing a lot of things, but oh my God, could they close deals? Their fulfillment was really bad. And if you flip that, so their culture was that way. So when you flip that, it's like now you have people that all they build out is processes and procedures, and it's protocols for the sake of protocols, but they're not innovative enough. And to your point, when you as a CEO or as a business owner or whatever, is that when you appreciate all of those things working together, then you have a robust, well-rounded business. And then now you're able to pivot faster. You're able to go offensive quick. You're able to go defensive quick. You're able to maneuver your business in a much better way because the culture of that business is well-rounded. You have your people that are social. You have your people that are process. You have your people that are very kind of amiable, make sure everyone is cool with each other. You have other ones that hold each other accountable. You have a good balance of that, a good balance attack. I don't care if you're running a Taco Bell. I don't care if you're running like Kaiser Permanente. I don't care if you're running Nike. I don't care if you're running, a podcast studio, a marketing agency. Does not matter. That's just human nature to win. Villages, countries, military, sports teams, they all have this to a T, and they appreciate that. And that is what's going to bring out an amazing culture, is that mix match of really good people.
So it's an interesting point you brought up there, and it makes me think of the scenario where you have a real shit culture, but the company's doing really well.
Yeah.
Revenue is crazy good. And I think in that scenario, it's how to, because you mentioned like 2 episodes ago, I think it was, about proactive changes that people take versus reactive. And most business owners are reactive. They wait until shit's falling apart to do something. So you have a company that's making maybe $10 million a year. They grew over $1 million from last year. Their culture sucks and it's terrible, but the revenue blinds them from understanding. So how do you kind of take that scenario where it's like, hey, we're doing great, my culture is not an issue here. What do you do in that scenario?
So their business is doing well. They're making money. We identify that their culture is terrible, but they believe that their culture is fine.
Or maybe it's just not an issue, right? It's like, we're doing amazing. We're up 20% from last year. What the hell is the problem?
Right.
What do you do then?
So I would look at any other metrics that support my case. And there's this saying that you want to give people get what you need and get people what they want. And there's ways of flipping culture into being a offensive weapon, I guess you could say. So because this is all semantics, what culture means to me in our organization, and to them they're like, yeah, our culture is fine. We're making money. We're winning. It's like, okay, cool, gotcha. Yeah. What are you trying to do next with the business? I want to continue to grow. Well, it's fantastic. How much more are you looking to grow? Where do you want to take this thing? How much of a fire do we need to light up? And it's like, oh, I really want to take from 10 million to 25 million. Great, fantastic. Do you mind if I ask you questions about some of these anchors that I have here? So leadership, obviously you're making a lot of money. What are your margins like? Tell me a little bit about your workforce. How many people are quitting? I would get into the nitty gritty of those things and be like, hey man, I really found out a way where we can make you way more money, way less headache. And we need to look at it through the lens of culture. I think that this thing is already winning. We're just going to win more. We're going to throw some kerosene at this thing. And in order for us to win and kind of take it to another level, we got to appreciate culture a little bit. And that's going to make this thing a juggernaut. Are you with me on that? So it's like flipping those things where I think our culture is fine. I think it is too. You're winning. I would agree with them. But are we trying to grow here? Bigger margins, right? Okay, cool. Then we got to look at these numbers and expand on these numbers, which might be the turnover rate, might be burnout rate. How many people are doing overtime because of ops? Okay. Then we need to start bolstering our personnel a little bit better so we can support these people. And then, and only then, are we going to be able to double and triple the business. So let's put our eye on culture a little bit and appreciate these KPIs and these metrics, and it's going to express itself through the people. Then we're going to get to that 25 million.
Yeah, see that's
flipping that shit.
That's an important point right there, is the measurable, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you have the company doing great. You said we're walking around saying we're winning, and we're
because they're looking at it from a certain lens.
We're savage and we're the shit, and it's like, all right, but then your turnover rate is 30%, and and you might say, well, all right, people leave, come and go, but I want you guys to think about this: if you have a doctor, maybe one doctor leaves a practice, you're looking at to replace that doctor, hire somebody new. It's about $500,000 to $1 million gone. So if you think about a larger practice, or maybe like you had mentioned Kaiser Permanente, it's like, hey, we lost 50 doctors this year. It's like, well, that's 25 million to 50 million gone that you'll never see ever again. Or if you look at employee productivity, we had touched on it at the beginning. People who are motivated by a culture that, and I want to get into this right after this, but they're motivated by a culture that really appreciates them.
Yeah,
they're going to put more into it. So for the person who says, Antonio, culture is bullshit. We're making $10 million and I haven't even spent 1 ounce of energy focused on that. What's the big deal? If you said, hey, all of your employees that you have in this organization, you're getting 50% of their best. So for every dollar you spend on their salary, you're getting half of that back because they're not fully vested or they're not fully engaged, versus the company that gets 70 to 80% of their employees. What does that 30% represent? So I want you guys to really hear what Antonio was saying about when we talk about the metrics and KPIs of employee engagement and productivity and turnover. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the thing that is 100% the thing that got me completely flipped on culture, was when I looked at all the employees that quit because of how I managed. And then I just started doing the math on how much does it cost to replace this person and that person. And I got to a point where I was like, holy shit, I cost this owner, who I love working for, and I love the guy, he's like my brother, I cost him well over $100,000 every single year, just because I couldn't keep employees from quitting.
Right.
And like when I did that, I was like, holy shit, I need to do something drastic about myself. So even and that's when the company was doing crazy good. But to your point, offense versus defense, are we focusing on just making money, but not focused on how to keep as much of that?
Yeah.
So for like that visionary, excited person you were talking about, you see that a lot, where it's like, hey, we made $20 million last year. Yeah, but you lost almost $20 million. Like you spent almost $20 million
Yeah.
too. So you didn't make anything really.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I feel like that comes into play. But I wanted to actually ask also, like, what are some easy, simple things that companies can do on a daily basis to really create the kind of culture or environment where employees want to show up, they want to work, and they want to really get an outcome?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is going to look really different from company to company. If you're in a startup and it's like you and like 3 other people, it's going to look a little bit different than you're in a company and you have like 300 employees or something like that. It's going to look a little bit different. Generally speaking, you want to appreciate how people light up. So there's this really great book called The 5 Love Languages, right? And people think that it's just on a romantic level. No, it is. You could flip that into it being quite professional, like super. So recognition is a really big thing for human beings, generally speaking. Even if I'm saying like, Dan, how's your day going? Or like addressing people by their name. There's little things that you can do that really boil down into communication too as well. There's different strategies you can use to identify people, recognize people, provide praise, and doing it maybe differently from person to person. There are some people, and probably someone here is watching this, that like, if I were to do this in your company, you would be like, I'm quitting today. Like, I would never do this. And it's like, all right, hey, we're going to bring in Dan in front of everybody. Could you give us a speech because you did such a great job? They're going to be like, no, I don't want to be in front of anybody. However, there's some people that are like, yeah, that's right. Fucking show you guys what it is. And so I think it's identifying like who your team is, making adjustments on how to recognize them, how to make them feel like $1 million. When you make people feel great, when you make people feel like what they're doing is matters, when you articulate the importance of their job and what it means to you and how, and the results of that, like, oh my God, like this, hey, we just got a review, Dan, and this review came from Peggy. And Peggy was one of our clients. She was one of our patients. And she just did like this Bible of a review talking how incredible you are, how much you helped her, how she's so happy that she came across our practice. She went around with 5 different doctors. They all treated her terrible. But when she came here, she felt amazing. And I just want to recognize that wouldn't have been possible if you didn't constantly demonstrate the core values of our business. And you actually exemplified that. And this is what we got. And I'm so proud to have you on board. You're the man. Absolutely incredible. Great job. Something even as simple as that goes a long way with people. So when they go home and they're able to show it to their family, like, hey, this is someone that I worked with and I changed their life. It means so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to quit. Said no one, right? It's right. It's not going to happen. But as a leader and as a manager or even as a colleague, you still want to do that. If I'm in a practice or if I'm in a business and that's my counterpart, like, dude, I saw that review that came in. Dude, that's freaking so awesome, dude. Like that, I'm learning so much just by you having by my side, man. I'm really excited to come to work because you're such a stud, bro. It might sound weird, it might sound off, but like sometimes like that is the biggest thing. And if you're encouraging that in your organization, that we're elevating each other, we're speaking highly of each other, we're edifying each other, don't you think our patients or our customers are going to feel that? It's a natural thing because we definitely feel it. I'm sure we've walked into different places where it's like, these people hate each other and it is so obvious. I don't care if it's a Walmart. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It'd be a gas station and be like, they're about to brawl right behind this register, dude. You could feel it. Yep. But you can also feel it on the other side. And in this day and age where it really takes that kind of over the top, high level, positive culture for people to talk about it. What is it like? People are 7 times more likely to write a negative review than a positive one.
100%.
It's pretty high up there, right? I could be wrong on that one. So if we are having people write positive reviews about their experience with your business, you got to be on point. And it's totally achievable because it's just an attitude thing. It's choosing to do that. And I think elevating and communicating that with each other, I think is a big thing that tends to not be encouraged as much, to celebrate each other's wins.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and you made some really good points in the sense of everything you just described. And this is what's really good for people who are, managing team or whatever. It doesn't cost really any money.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't cost you anything to say great job or I appreciate you or thank you. You know, and one of the things I feel like some of us run into challenges, and this is something I know I dealt with when I was just kind of starting out, is the expectation that people should just do their job. So they do their job, and then you're like, all right, why do I need to show them some like appreciation or gratitude? Like, you're doing your job that I hired you for.
That's what the money is for.
Yeah,
it's like that scene in Mad Men. Like, that's why I'm paying you.
It's like, that's what you're supposed to do. That's literally part of your roles and responsibilities. And I have to say thank you. But then you look at other people who are doing the same thing and they're not doing their job. And you're like, I just wish they would do, I wish Joe would do what Antonio's doing. Well, you don't even give Antonio any, gratitude or appreciation. So what's to stop him from, doing that eventually as well? And it's this aspect of reinforcing the behaviors that we want to see from other people. Mm-hmm. So if you can't get your doctor to walk patients up to the front desk, and then you have a doctor who walks the patients up and then you don't say anything, versus great job, thank you so much for doing that. That's going to reinforce the behavior that you want to see regardless. And that's where I feel a lot of people miss opportunities to actually build on the culture. And you also you said it's very basic stuff of just appreciation, gratitude. I'm glad you brought up the point about love language. Because, and most of us don't even know what that is for our spouses, forget about employees, but knowing how people like to receive appreciation. And I know I had a CEO who he would give me gift cards. I'm like, dude, I don't need a gift card. I just a pat on the back and great job is all. Yeah, that's good enough.
I just need
me.
$50 million.
Yeah, it's like, it's like this doesn't mean anything to me. I appreciate the gesture though, but everybody has a different way of feeling maybe not the respect, but feeling the gratitude and appreciation of a company. So I agree with what you're saying. There's getting a good sense of how do people like to receive it, but at the end of the day, don't make it hard. Just fucking do something. Like, you don't have to worry about giving somebody a gift card to Amazon or whatever. It's just, you can do easy stuff every single day that doesn't require any money. It doesn't require much time. It just requires you being present in the moment and being fully aware of what your employees are actually doing. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think a lot of people miss it. It's just, they overcomplicate it. Going back to the beginning, we said, why do we really focus on the culture? We talked about companies that are making money and don't focus on it at all. Mm-hmm. Is in healthcare, and you touched on this about patient outcomes and what patients see and hear in a company. And that's where I always find it funny when employees anywhere act a certain way. Patients watch, and people watch each other, so they see things and they pick up on the mentality. And there's not always things you can measure. And that would be interesting. That's one thing where we don't always can see how culture affects a patient's outcome. But I think the example I always give, and a lot of us experience this, you go to a doctor because you love the doctor. But then, and I've had a lot of patients telling me this, but then they say, but I hate the front desk. Like, the front desk is, they're fucking miserable.
Tammy is a problem.
Yeah, it's like, I love my doctor,
Tammy could be gone.
Yeah, that girl at the front has such an attitude, or it's very cold, and then they go back and the doctor's all warm and fuzzy. Like, I just go for the doctor. And that's what Antonio's talking about in office cultures, that people pick up on that. And they wonder what is either going on with you, or what's going on with the employee, or what's going on in this organization that you have employees like this. And it tells you about what you're willing to tolerate.
Yeah. If I can kind of piggyback on that. So this kind of boils down to reputation too as well, and reputation management. This is so important because a couple things are going to be impacted with that. And one of them is it's not just the reputation that you have with the patients or with your clients or with your patrons, but also the reputation amongst the workforce. Yes. Is that if people start getting wind that working with Dan is 1,000 times better than the person I'm working with because they're getting recognized, the bonuses, they're making money. It's just so much fun. I don't care if you're working construction. I don't care if you're even here in Las Vegas, right? There's a ton of bars you could work at. Where do you want to work at? So the place you can make the most money, that gives you the least headache, and that it's fun to actually work with. It's like, well, these are things that you can adjust through your leadership and through your culture. So don't underestimate the power of your reputation, especially with the workforce, because if you have a great business, what's the obvious next step? Start expanding, opening up new locations. And you can't clone your employees. You got to get them someplace else. So if you have a list of people, of potential employees that are just like chomping at the bits to like, please interview me. I'd love to work with you. Is there any spots open? And it's so much easier as an organization to scale that because you're also being mindful of your reputation with your local workforce too.
Man, that's a great point. And I think about how that actually impacts a business financially. You talked about the next step is scaling and maybe growing multiple locations. Just what could you do from a standpoint of revenue if you can create that kind of environment? And you have that kind of reputation that not only encourages customers or patients to come back in, but you made a good point of how does that actually encourage people to want to work for you, and how that leads to better talent, and then just kind of creates the positive cycle of better talent, better employees, better outcomes, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So what that does is it creates consistency on, it's consistency on your brand and quality control around your patient or customer experience. So when I go to Chick-fil-A like down the street here versus the one like 5 miles away, it's probably going to be the same experience. So people are saying the same thing. If I go to Ritz-Carlton over here in Vegas, and then there's another Ritz-Carlton like in San Diego or wherever, is that there's consistencies on that. And if you're expanding and you're able to have your pick of the flock of like whoever's going to come on board as you're expanding into new locations, it's easier to identify the people that maybe heard about your practice moving, people that are in alignment with your core values. There's a want to be a part of it. Like, I want to be on your team. Please choose me. Like that's such a different, it's a different position to be in. But what it does is it helps. What they're indirectly doing is saying, I know your brand. I'm in alignment with your brand, and I want to contribute to the brand. That's what it's saying. And your brand is also a culture thing. So what that does is, it creates consistency on your customer experience, and it creates consistency on your brand experience.
Man, that was good.
That's revenue right there. That's money right there.
That's, kidding, man. Well, I mean, like at the end of the day, there's a reason, and you guys are obviously open to look all this up. There's numerous stats out there to show the companies that focus on what we just talked about make significant. I mean, you're talking 2.5, 4 times more than comparable companies in terms of revenue growth. So when you're assessing your company and you're saying we're doing great, the real question is, how can we always be doing better? And culture is one area where a lot of companies, like Antonio mentioned at the beginning, gets overlooked. But focusing on these intangibles and showing some gratitude, developing your core values, and really living them day to day will help skyrocket your business and just create better outcomes. So at the end of the day, focus on what we talked about, core values, your values as an owner, your values as a manager, and understand how bringing that to the clinic or hospital or office every single day has a trickle down effect to not just your employees, but to patient care and customer care as well. And focusing on these aspects of your company will lead to crazy amount of growth.
So much growth. Yeah. So, culture is the thing that I feel like tends to be like that ugly stepchild that's kind of in the corner. But when you really put that at the forefront, and you're a leader and you're a business owner, basically articulating to your organization that I care about this environment. This environment matters. You matter. And we're here to win. We're here to make an impact. We're here to crush the competition. We're here to offer, a different look for our market that's more in alignment with certain people, whatever it is. When you get people on the same page like that, and they're marching to the same beat of the drum, and they're demonstrating your core values in the right way, it's hard not to win. It's really not. And it's like, imagine how much bigger your business could possibly be with less headache, with less personnel issues, if culture was actually at the forefront. And it's not always. And it's a damn shame, because you see companies start to implode and lose really great people to a competitor because the culture was off. And it's not fair to people. And I think it's wrong. So if you really appreciate that, and you're adding strides and margins because you're appreciating this personnel side of business, the compound effect of that is massive. It is absolutely massive. And it shouldn't be shouldn't be swept under the rug. But if that's at the forefront, I guarantee you, business is going to be easier. It's going to be funner. You're going to be attracting top talent. And it's something that if people are watching this and you're not sure, like, hey, I'm not sure if this is the first time even hearing culture. This is the first time of me even considering that. I want to figure out like what are some areas or what some strategies I could apply with my company to get this thing, moving and shaking. Then you need to get in contact with us. You need to connect with us in some way, shape, or form. Go to our website, follow us here, something, and we'll be here to help you out.
All right, welcome to the follow-up, a little bonus episode for you healthcare practices and organizations where we're going to go over some actionable tips based on the episode I hope you just watched. Now, today we talked all about culture, which honestly is one of my favorite topics, simply because how I used to create a terrible culture and then I was able to completely turn it around and I saw a massive difference. Now, on a few episodes prior when we discussed leadership, and I talked about employee replacement cost and what that effect would have on you guys as it relates to how much money we're spending on employee turnover, which is a real big aspect when it comes down to organizational culture. And I had mentioned you're going to spend either 16% of a person's salary up to 213% of their salary. So it is really critical that you get your culture in place, because honestly, that is one of the top reasons people quit. It's usually you didn't show me enough appreciation or gratitude. I didn't have any growth opportunities. It was a toxic environment. My leader was terrible. Like, these are all things that are really related to culture. And I want you to think about this. You want to get the best out of employees. That is the name of the game, right? You're spending your money to pay them, and you want to make sure that they're delivering at a high level. Well, if your culture stinks, how much are you really getting out of employees? And then when I say that, it's not a matter of taking advantage of them, but you do want to obviously maximize your talent. So in a toxic environment, you're going to get about 30% of the employee's best. So I want you to think about that. If you have an employee who maybe you're paying $100,000 every single year, you're essentially getting $30,000 worth of work. And I want you to think about that. How many employees do you have? And if you're getting 30, maybe 40 to 50% of their best, how much money are you literally just completely wasting? Now, the best companies, they're going to get about 70 to 75%. So nobody's at 100. But that 20 to 30% increase, think of what that could turn into for you. All right, so these things are really important. It's not just a matter of, saving money and maximizing talent, but that is an important aspect. And again, I had mentioned prior that a lot of you out there are wasting maybe 6, 7 figures annually on poor leadership and secondarily, crappy culture. So that's why it's really important that you work on these aspects. Now, what I want to really focus on first and foremost today, and we talked about in the episode, easy things that we can do today to start improving your culture. And I mentioned one when we're talking about why employees quit: appreciation and gratitude. And this is something that I struggled with, honestly, when I was younger, of having to thank people for doing their job. But at the end of the day, people want to know that they're being observed and that they're being appreciated for actually, yes, just doing what you hired them for. But at the same time, too, how many employees don't do what they were hired to do? Right? How many conversations do you need to have? So if you want to reinforce the behaviors that you want to see, you have to actually just give a little appreciation. And realistically, how much time, energy, and money does that cost? It's like literally zero. To go up to an employee and say, hey, thank you for doing what you're doing. Or I really appreciate your effort. Or I'm really grateful that I hired you. You made a difference in this organization. Like, what is that actually really doing to you that you say, I don't want to do that? So start with some appreciation and gratitude for your employees, and honestly, mean it. Don't fake it, because people are not stupid. They know when you're being inauthentic. Second thing is really, how do you demonstrate some trust for your team? And I had talked about that on, I think 2 episodes ago, about building some trust with employees. You hire them to do their job, and then you micromanage them. Again, no, that is the kind of culture that people don't want to be in. They want to know, you hired me for my talent, you hired me for who I am, but then you won't let me do that. So let people do their job. And then training and developing. Do you just hire people and throw them right into it? And then 6 months later, you're scratching your head wondering, hey, why is this employee still struggling? right? Why haven't they learned everything? Because you threw them right in and you didn't give them the opportunity to actually learn and train and develop. But say you did that and you're like, I onboarded them, great. I trained them for a good month or two. What about after that? Do you have a process where you keep training and mentoring employees? Like, they want to grow, right? No, think about this. The most frustrating thing, or one of the most frustrating things, has to be you just graduated. You may be 26 or 27 if you went to grad school, you got your doctorate, and then within a year or two, you're looking at where you're at currently, and you're saying, I think I reached my pinnacle already. Like, how depressing is that? You're not even 30, and you're like, I reached my ceiling already? And that's what happens to a lot of employees. They don't see any ability to grow. So why would they stay? Or they could just stay with you for the next 30 years and be miserable. Like, think about it. We all want to grow in some capacity. So what kind of growth plan do you have? And then this one I love is pay them what the market calls for. Now, I say that because it's very easy for employees just to say, hey, I know the average salary is $80,000, but I think I'm worth $100, and if you don't pay me that, I'm going to quit today. I'm not talking about that kind of bull crap, and I'm also not talking about your own emotions about how you feel what people should get paid. And what I mean by that is, well, I think a front desk person should only get paid $45,000, even though the market says it's close to $50,000. And then you're wondering why your turnover rate for front desk personnel sucks. So you have to look, the market tells you what people should get paid. Now, the challenge for this over the last few years, and this is going to be something you guys actually have to really sit down and do, is that there's been a lot of salary changes since COVID. People have really scrutinized their positions in companies and are obviously questioning, do you guys have my growth and my best interests at heart? So you see a lot of people leaving, moving to other jobs in order to get higher salaries. So the challenge that creates is you maybe hired people in the past at a lower salary and maybe a lot lower than what the market is calling for now. And now you run the risk of hiring people brand new, maybe right out of school, who have no experience, and you're going to pay them more than somebody who's been with you for 2 to 4 years or maybe even more. So you have to, when you do a market analysis of salary, you have to look at and make some hard decisions. Do I bump this person who's been loyal to me and comes in here and works hard every day? Do I really give them a massive salary to get them just to the level where this new hire is at who has no experience? Only you can answer that question. I know I would advocate for that. I know it's definitely a little bit of a challenge financially, but people also talk. Employees talk to each other, and there's nothing that will ruin a culture more than you're paying the new person that much more than me. So you have to look at what does the market call for, pay people that rate. So I want you to go back to the beginning and think about what we talked about. Easy ways to start working on your culture right now. Start showing some authentic gratitude and appreciation for your employees. Whether it's a janitor, a doctor, don't just show gratitude for the people that are making you a shit ton of money. Show it for the people that come in every day and work hard. Okay? Number 2, don't micromanage. Demonstrate some trust. Learn how to empower your employees. Learn how to delegate. 3rd, what kind of training and developing are we going to do? So starting to build out some programs, or even just meeting with employees more frequent so they can tap into your knowledge and get a little bit more value from you. And then last but not least, pay people what they're worth. All right. Appreciate you guys checking in. I'll see you next episode.